In this video, we'll be looking at one dress for every year in the 20th century, and these are all evening looks. During the first decade of the 20th century, fashion followed closely to the decade prior. The fashionable silhouette continued to be dominated by the S shape or S curve. During this time, there was an emphasis on modesty, but evening dresses were more revealing with a low décolletage and short sleeves. Skirts were bell-shaped and featured a tight bodice, but as the decade went on, skirts began coming closer to the body, revealing a more natural form. Fabrics were made from silk, satin, damask, and chiffon, and at the beginning of the decade, they were typically in light, soft colors. But as time went on, more exuberant colors came to the forefront of mainstream fashion. At the beginning of the 1910s, the rise of Orientalism began to greatly influence popular fashion, and it was Paul Poiret who helped set off the craze. Evening dresses were colorful, highly detailed, floor-length, and contained an empire waist. As the decade rolled into the teens, the dresses began taking on even more experimentation. They began to lose their fluid and natural skirt shape, with the length rising above the ankle and the skirt widening, as well as the waist dropping to the natural position. Some designers were more forward-thinking than others, while the majority of women adopted fashion changes more slowly, especially as World War I was going on. The 1920s began moving towards simplicity in dressing. Tight corsets and heavy layers of fabric were eliminated. Instead, vibrant colors and beautifully ornamented garments in a boyish form were in vogue. Dresses began taking on a rectangular shape, eliminating a woman's waistline and even bust lines. Waistlines began to drop until 1923, where they rested at the hips, and hemlines began to rise until 1926, where they started to again fall. Although it was most popular to have a higher hemline in the middle of the decade, they never rose above the knee, as that was seen as improper. It was this time as well that an alternative to the straight-cut dress became popular, known as the robe de style, which was characterized by a dropped waist and a full skirt. The 1930s was marked by a feminine silhouette. Hemlines fell to the ankle and the waistline was at its natural position. Fabrics were more fluid and soft and characterized by less decoration as the previous decade. The 1930s was also heavily influenced by the glamour of Hollywood. Women sought to look like their favorite stars, where they emulated their modest neckline but revealing upper back. One of the most important developments of this time for fashion was the invention of the bias cut, where the fabric was cut 45 degrees against the weave, creating a fluid, body-skimming garment. The emphasis was put at the back of the dress, which sometimes featured a train. As we enter the 1940s, a more structured silhouette begins to be favored by the majority of women. And some designers, of course, are quicker to this trend than others are. During this time, many women were helping out with the war effort and had little time to be wearing evening gowns and going to parties. Because of this, women began dressing in a sporty, casual, and practical way, even after the war had ended. The smart simplicity of utilitarian clothing quickly lost its appeal, and people yearned for glamorous times. In 1947, Dior launched the new look, which became the favored style of the 1950s, being a wide, shorter skirt and a tight-fitted bodice. It was during this time that women's fashion prioritized elegance, formality, and perfectly matched accessories. There were two favored styles for 1950s evening wear, one being the new look, which was the tight-fitted bodice and the large, voluminous skirt, and the other was a form-fitting bodice and a slim and narrow skirt. Dresses could be made from a variety of materials and were done in many different colors. Although it became increasingly acceptable for women to wear slacks or pants during some occasions, it was not appropriate for an evening look. It was also at this time when the cocktail dress was introduced to the public. These dresses lay in between day wear and evening gowns when it comes to formality. They could be at the length of a day dress, but be embellished like evening wear. The ladylike elegance of the previous decade was inherited in the beginning of the 1960s, but quickly was traded out for fun and youthful designs. Overall, 1960s fashion was becoming more casual and comfortable. First, the mod movement became very popular with the onset of the miniskirt and the mini dress. The artistic movement was futuristic, geometric, and simplistic. Highly elegant evening wear throughout the decade was full length, with more structure at the beginning of the decade, loosening up to less structure towards the end of the decade. By 1969, the full-length maxi skirt had emerged in fashion, and a move towards the hippie aesthetic became very popular. Bold patterns and colors took center stage, often made with free-flowing, lightweight materials. In the early to mid-70s, designers looked to the 30s and 40s for much of their inspiration. It was a decade that saw a wide range of popular styles, ranging from prairie dresses worn and influenced by hippie fashion to the flashy party wear worn to disco nightclubs. It was in the 1970s that ready-to-wear clothing became increasingly accessible. There were also new synthetic fabrics that meant fashionable styles could be bought at any price point. By the late 1970s, glamour is kicked up a notch as we head into the 1980s. Women's fashion becomes more structured, and more is truly more when it comes to accessories, designs, and bold colors. Balloon sleeves, shoulder pads, and big skirts could all be seen on classic 1980s evening wear. It was in the 1980s that women's bodies were now shaping the clothing, rather than the clothing shaping the body. The dominant trend of the 1980s was bigger is better, taffeta, bright colors, and not being afraid to accessorize. Garments were done in feminine tones, often consisting of pastels or floral motifs. During this time as well, we see a rise in black garments being worn for evening wear and for day wear. By the end of the 80s, we slowly see a move towards minimalist dressing. In the 20th century, fashion reached its most casual point in the 1990s. The early part of the decade saw a revival of 1960s and 1970s styles, such as the mini skirts, flares, and punk layers. The grunge look also came to the forefront of fashion, but by the mid-90s, more feminine styles appeared. Slip dresses epitomized the minimalist look during this time. Dressing in a formal and conservative way greatly decreased as the era progressed. The most modest dresses could be floor-length, body skimming, and even have long sleeves, while others were mini dresses that hugged the shape of the body. Garments came in a variety of options, styles, and colors. Towards the end of the decade, moving into the early 2000s, femininity and casual dressing only increased. Tell me in the comments down below which decade was your favorite and why. And also make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.